Good morning, everyone. Firstly, thank you to the conference organisers for allowing me this platform to talk about Canopy and how we see the future of cannabis, mostly in Germany, given the current discussions on recreational. So my name is Paul Steckler. I'm the General Manager for the International Markets in Canopy, which in simple terms is everything outside of North America. So we have teams in Australia, Latin America, Germany, Poland, Czechia, and the UK. I've been in the industry, so my background is about 25 years in pharmaceuticals, so previously commercial director at Pfizer. I've run a few small biotechs in London and joined Canopy in 2019. And as you can imagine, in those 3 years, quite a lot has changed in the industry. Some of the same faces, but quite a lot of change. So my 30 minutes, I'm going to focus on four key areas. One, I'm going to talk about Canopy growth. So I apologise in advance if those of you are very familiar with our company. I'd like to just kind of set the scene for those that aren't around who we are, what our vision is, what our purpose is. I then want to talk a little bit about research and how that interplays with commercial strategy. And then I will get on to legalization. Sorry, in fact, I'm doing that third. In fact, then I'm going to talk about legalization. I'm hopefully not going to duplicate what you've heard over the last 2 days. I've been in nearly every talk in the last 2 days. They've all been very informative, but I'm going to talk mainly about the Canadian experience and kind of how we see what we should be positioning with the German government moving forwards. And then finally, I want to talk about the future of cannabis in Europe as well. So firstly, who are we? Canopy Growth. So Canopy Growth, you can see, you can read the slide yourself. We're a world-leading CPG company. One of the things we're proud that we think sets us apart from other companies is our portfolio is very much based on deep consumer and customer insights. So we try and I talk about my history in Canopy, and there's other people in the room. I know some of my Aurora colleagues are over here and probably will remember 3 years ago in Germany, it was good enough just to have supply. So I think, back then between us and Aurora and other companies, whoever had supply won share, won the market. That was good enough back then. That's not good enough anymore. So we now know that the industry has evolved in the last 3 years. Consumers, whether they be pharmacists, healthcare professionals or patients, understand cannabis more than they did 3 years ago. So it's not good enough just to have supply. It's not good enough just to have a high THC strain. There's more to it. There's terpene levels. There's other factors that come into play. There's quality as well. So for me, the industry has evolved and we have to understand our consumers, whoever they are. We have to understand them deeply to bring the right product to the market. And that's something that Canopy now is very focused on, that we spend a lot more time on insights with our customers, whoever those customers are, depending on which market we operate in. So the company has gone through a lot of change, which I think has been very public. So you'll know right back from 2014, one of the things that we're proud of at Canopy Growth is we've had a lot of sector firsts. So I'm not going to read them all out because we'd be here all day, but we were the first to export to a G7 country back there. You'll see that we've made lots of acquisitions. We were the first federally licensed company in North America. We were also the first publicly listed company in North America as well. And you can see over the recent years, our acquisitions, so our strategy is very much based on in-house development to match what we believe where the market is going, alongside strategic acquisitions to make sure we have the right portfolio. And some of those acquisitions you'll be very familiar with, some maybe not, but you can see in 2019 we acquired This Works, which is a wellness brand based in London. At the same time, it's not on the slide, it should be because it's really important, but we acquired Storz & Bickel, based out of Tuttlingen. So our medical device company, which I think I'm hoping everyone in the room is very familiar, certainly should be very familiar with the Volcano, which obviously has a huge following globally. And then latterly, we've made some very strategic acquisitions in the US as well, as the US heads towards, hopefully towards legalization. So our strategy, I've touched on this already. You can see we invest a lot of time in consumer insights. That in essence allows us to develop the best products for the market, which then in essence leads to loyalty. And for us, that's an unbelievably important thing in this space, that we have not just loyalty in Canopy Growth, but loyalty in our brands, because once you build that loyalty, that's what consumers come back to. And as I mentioned earlier, if you look in Germany, you can have, there are lots more players, several players when I joined the company. There are now many, many, many players in the market. for us to differentiate, we have to build trust. And so for us, and when you think about legalization, we have to build trust with our governments, with our regulators, and that's something that's really important to us. And then once you've done that, clearly we have to have the right distribution in place. So we look at how we distribute, where we distribute, which partners we work with. We only work with credible partners across the world. And then finally, the kind of thing that everyone wants is high margins, clearly. And so if we get all of these things right, it leads to a profitable business, which for the international business that I run, we are a profitable business, and we have been for quite some time. So legalization, I'll spend a bit of time on this slide. This is probably one of the most important topics. There are three areas that I want to discuss. One is traceability. So, and everyone has touched on the Canadian experience in the last 2 days, but there's some important figures I wanted to share about why we, and our purpose around this, because it's something I've heard, I think, a lot in the last 2 days, and I think we need to probably challenge ourselves as an industry in this room. Is our purpose as Canopy, is about moving people from an illegal, illicit product, which is unregulated, possibly full of toxins, possibly has high microbial load, and frankly, is just not good for society. So our goal and our purpose is to end prohibition globally, and we're very public in that statement. Alongside that, yes, we will make money, but let's be really clear, our purpose is more important. If we can get the purpose right, that's more important. And I think, unfortunately, we can end up very focused on our own strategic goals in different businesses, whatever they be, whether it be domestic cultivation, whether it be whatever it might be. The reality is governments, and the reason that we are having this change with the German government isn't just based on economics. It's based on the fact that we actually want to end prohibition. So that for us, that's our purpose. That's actually very important. If you look at the Canadian example, after legalization in 2018, you saw a move from to the illicit to obviously to legal product was only 9%. By 2019, that figure had risen to 19%, and then by 2020, it was up to 44%. But the reality is there is still a high proportion of product that still goes through the illicit channel in Canada, so it's still a challenge. However, from an economic perspective, Deloitte estimate that since legalization in Canada, there's been an increase in GDP of 32.3 billion euros. Sorry, in fact, that's euros, 32.3 billion euros. So, which is significant, and that's Canada, which clearly is 2.5 times smaller than Germany. So, it is a huge economic opportunity. That brings on to education. So, another really important factor about legalization, which I think can be lost, is at the moment we can only communicate through the medical channel with pharmacies, healthcare professionals. That's all we can do. So we can't educate consumers. Moving to once legalization happens, that gives us a huge opportunity to start a new conversation with consumers, to educate consumers on the benefits of cannabis, but also on why regulated legal cannabis is so much more, is so much better than the illicit channels. And Benedict talks, obviously about the ease of how easy it is to get illegal cannabis, and it is in most countries quite easy. So we need to, this allows us to have that conversation with the public. And one of the things we did in Canada, so when the announcement for legalization happened in 2017, one of the first things Canopy did was partnered with a group called Mothers Against Basically Drink Driving. And one of the reasons is because, as you can imagine, once cannabis was legalized, there's a potential risk that people who weren't educated on cannabis would just get out, would basically smoke a joint, get in the car and drive. And of course, clearly, I don't need to tell everyone in the room that's clearly dangerous. So legalization allowed us to start those conversations, whereas we couldn't have those conversations before. So that's going to be really important that we actually think about education. It's not been discussed much in the last 2 days, but that once post-legalization, we have to have a plan as an industry, not just as Canopy, but as a whole industry, about how do we work together to educate consumers, to make sure that we are responsible in how we legalize cannabis. The third point is around responsible consumption. I think lots of people have mentioned about youth and the risk to youth. So if you look in the Canadian example, just to give you some figures. So when you look at once legalization happened, there was a reduction of 50% in consumption amongst 15 to 17-year-olds. So it went from 20% of 15 to 17-year-olds consuming cannabis down to 10% once legalization happened. So that's a really positive message, and one we should be giving the German government. There were then several surveys that took place. There was the National Canadian Survey, and the Statistics Canadian survey, which took place. And those surveys, there were in essence three key points from those surveys. One, there wasn't an increase in consumption in youth, was the first point. The second was that consumption in 18 to 24-year-olds remained stable. And the third important point was that the age of consumption didn't decrease. It remained also the same. So they're really important messages that we, as a company, and I think as an industry, we need to get out there, because this is what will reassure governments and regulators about why legalization is a really good option. So I wanted to touch on research. I haven't mentioned this yet, but our medical business in international markets, the business I look after is all medical. We have no legal jurisdictions yet. Germany will be our first outside of Canada. The medical channel will remain extremely important to Canopy growth. So it will stand, and in Canada, we still have a very prominent medical business in Canada. It still flourishes. It's still a really good business, and there is still demand for that medical business. Benedict did show a slide and there was some showing what happened to the medical business once recreational happened, and there was definitely a move, and people have talked about this kind of the grey area of patients who access the medical channel, but then very quickly moved to recreational because it was easier to get product. However, that has stabilised in Canada, so we know there is still demand for medical products, and so we will remain very focused on medical products. And I wanted to touch on research, because actually one of the things that we're very passionate about is we have a desire to understand our products, a desire to understand pharmacokinetics, how the products work. And one example of that is a partnership we did with Madison University. And we did a study looking at basically the impact of CBD on menstrual symptoms. It was basically a 6-month trial, as you can see on the slide, a 6-month trial which basically showed benefit and a very clear benefit in the preliminary results. So this is just one example of many of lots of the research that Canopy Growth is taking part in, primarily for us to understand the products and then show the benefits to consumers. And CBD, everyone knows CBD is an interesting area. It's still, I think, very much consumers are very much ill-educated on CBD. People don't really understand CBD. In fact, when friends or people ask me what I do for a living, and I say, well, I work for a cannabis company, the first thing everyone says, oh, CBD, you do CBD. And it's like, actually, well, we do CBD, but we do a lot more than just CBD. So people are ill-informed. So this for us is very important, that we start getting the messages out about why our products are effective and why products should be used. So I think I've gone through that quite quicker than I planned. But anyway, so the future of cannabis, I wanted to spend a bit of time talking about the future of cannabis. And the first thing, I guess, my observation from the last 2 days, and it's probably a challenge to the room, is the industry, from what I've seen, because at the moment we have quite a fragmented industry. So having come from pharmaceuticals, in a similar situation that we're in now with legalization, the pharmaceutical industry would be very joined up in the approach to government. There would be a very clear strategy, very clear messaging, and it would be one message to the government to say, this is what we believe is the right path forwards. Whereas what I see at the moment in Germany, and I'm going to be really honest, is we have a medical market, which I think people have talked about, this 62,000 patients. I see that the industry and companies are very focused on that 62,000 patients. So we fight for those 62,000 patients. What we're not focused on is the 800,000 patients that could benefit from our products. That's where the fight should be. That's what we should be doing as an industry, but we're not doing that today. Instead, I think as an industry, we fight for the 62,000 patients, which is a tiny proportion of the market, and we're not actually thinking about how we build the market to get to the 800,000 patients. And my concern, speaking very openly, is that when I look at legalization, we're on the precipice of change happening fairly soon, but as an industry, we are not joined up. We're all thinking about probably our own goals, our own kind of short-term revenue when legalization happens, and we're not thinking about the long-term vision of where we could be in 3 or 4 years' time. So my kind of challenge to the group, because we're all in the industry here in this room, is we probably need to start thinking about the industry, not just our own companies within the industry. Now, clearly, as Canopy Growth, we're one of the bigger companies, so I'm hopefully speaking from a position of we want to work with people, we want to work with the industry, but at the moment, I have a concern. A very honest concern that at the moment we are not operating as an industry, and we need to, or this industry will continue as it is, which is fragmented. And we've gone. I think the industry has improved from the days when I joined, where we had somewhat people called it the Wild West. Lots of short term. I guess people coming in to make a short term, quick buck, and that's evolved over time, which is a good thing. But I think we still have a lot of work to do as an industry. So, so I believe the future of cannabis in Europe is around. When you see here, you can see we have brands, lots of brands from Canada. Once we have a legal market in Germany, we want to build brands, but we want to build an industry that is trusted, that people believe in. And also the other point that's really important, and Benedict touched on price, is what with the experience in Canada, one message I want to leave with the group is, one of the experiences is the reason that we haven't seen a wholesale shift from the illicit market to the legal market is driven by a number of factors. One is price. So cannabis in Canada is expensive, and that's primarily driven by tax. So the Canadian government, and we need to ensure the German government don't make the same mistake. The Canadian government set a tax of kind of $1 per gram. That was based on the assumption that the LPs would be selling at $10 per gram. In reality, what transpired is LPs that actually were selling around an average price of $3.99, so $3.99. So the tax went from 10% to 25%. On top of that, you then add on the provincial taxes, which was a tax on a tax, and then suddenly the tax was astronomical, and the price, which meant the price to consumers was high. This, of course, meant that, that actually, why would you move from an illegal product, an illicit product, which was cheaper? So a huge challenge for the Canadian industry has been around pricing. And we got it wrong, and the Canadian government got it wrong right from the start. And that price has been paid now for the last however many years now since legalization. So, our position very much is we need to have a low tax. It shouldn't be based on THC content. It should be based on weight. Because having it based on THC content makes no sense when you work through the maths. It should be based on weight. It should be low. We'd recommend 3%. If you look at the US, if you look at the Morvats, they're recommending going from 5% to 8%, and then staying at 8%. We'd also recommend we do this. We need some longevity. So this industry is an expensive industry to build. So we need to have 10 years at least, a fixed tax, so we know what we're doing. The second part of it is then we should mimic alcohol and tobacco post that 10-year period. So that's our position. That's where we see the industry going. And we believe by doing that, there's two things which consumers in Canada, two reasons not to move from illicit products. One was price. The other is quality. So again, we have to be really, really focused as an industry on quality products and not rush to get products onto the market, to be first to market. What we should be rushing to do is bring best quality products to consumers so they get the right experience, so they don't feel the need to go back to their dealer because they feel they can get a cheaper, better product than they do from the legal channels. That was kind of it for me. So I don't know. I probably talked too quickly, so apologies to the non-English speakers in the room if I've gone too quickly. But that was it. So thank you, and I don't know if you've got time for any questions.